Yet. It might have had a technical foul there just as his first half was expiring.
After receiving her sixth technical foul and a $1,000 fine, Caitlin Clark had every reason to be frustrated, but instead she chose a response that caught everyone by surprise. Indianapolis felt different that Friday night. It was the kind of evening that made people stop talking, stop scrolling, and simply watch. Almost nobody in basketball history had ever produced the kind of performance Clark delivered. By the time the final buzzer sounded, the basketball world was still trying to process what it had witnessed. She finished with 45 points, 10 assists for steals, and 2 blocks, joining an incredibly exclusive group of players across professional basketball to post such a remarkable stat line. Even more astonishing, she accomplished it in fewer than 30 minutes while still playing under a minute's restriction. Analysts immediately began comparing the performance to some of the greatest games ever played, with names like Michael Jordan and Luka Doncic entering the conversation. Social media struggled to find the words to describe what Clark had just done. For one unforgettable night, every headline centered on basketball, her performance, the record books, and what it meant for the future of her career. Then Saturday arrived, and everything changed in just 90 seconds. Early in Indiana's next game against the New York Liberty, Clark collided with a hard screen and fell to the floor. She looked toward the officials expecting a foul call, but none came. After getting back to her feet, she spoke to the nearest referee and was immediately assessed a technical foul. Coming just after her sixth technical of the season and the accompanying $1,000 fine, the moment suddenly placed her even closer to an automatic suspension if more technical fouls followed. The celebration from the previous night was still dominating highlight reels and social media. Yet less than a day later, the focus had shifted from history-making basketball to officiating. Fans were left asking how a player could go from producing one of the greatest performances of her career on Friday to becoming the center of another officiating controversy on Saturday. Indiana ultimately defeated New York behind another outstanding performance from Kelsey Mitchell, earning an important victory in the playoff race. It was a significant win for a Fever team fighting to improve its position in an increasingly competitive conference. But despite the result, much of the post-game discussion centered on Clark's technical foul and the growing debate surrounding officiating rather than the victory itself. The numbers were what people focused on next. 6 technical fouls already, only 2 more before an automatic one-game suspension. Instead of spending the weekend celebrating one of the greatest individual performances in women's basketball history, fans found themselves tracking technical fouls like a countdown clock. For many who had followed the season closely, the shift didn't feel like bad timing or an isolated incident. They believed it was simply the latest chapter in a story that had been building for months. To understand why Saturday generated such a strong reaction, many pointed back to June, when Clark received a technical foul against the Phoenix Mercury. It was the kind of emotional moment that often passes without much attention, but after reviewing the play, the WNBA chose to let the technical stand rather than rescind it. That decision immediately became a major talking point. Fans began sharing screenshots, comparing similar situations involving other players, and debating whether officiating standards were being applied consistently across the league. Every technical foul Clark received afterward was viewed through that same lens. By the time her 6th technical arrived in July, many supporters believed they were seeing a pattern rather than a series of unrelated calls. Throughout the season, they compiled video clips, box scores, and side-by-side comparisons, arguing that Clark was being judged differently from other players in similar situations. Whether or not those comparisons proved a broader trend remained a matter of debate, but the discussion continued to grow. Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White also acknowledged that the team had to be mindful of Clark's growing technical foul total, telling reporters they needed to be more strategic in managing those situations moving forward. Her comments highlighted that the issue had become something the coaching staff was actively considering during games. At the same time, the conversation expanded beyond WNBA circles, with national sports analysts discussing Clark's treatment and questioning the consistency of officiating. As the debate reached a broader audience, casual fans who had never paid much attention to technical foul procedures began asking whether the rules were being enforced evenly. What started as a discussion about individual calls gradually evolved into a larger conversation about consistency, fairness, and how the league's officiating was being perceived as Clark continued climbing the technical foul rankings. Clark's place in the technical foul standings made the conversation even more complicated. At that point in the season, she was tied with Kalia Copper for second most technical fouls in the league, behind only Angel Reese. On the surface, the numbers were the same, but many fans pointed out that their playing styles were very different. Reese plays a physical interior game. Copper relentlessly attacks the basket, while Clark's game is built around passing, shooting, spacing, and perimeter play. That contrast led many supporters to question why players with such different styles had accumulated similar technical foul totals. Whether coincidence or not, the comparison fueled even more debate. In the absence of clear explanations from the league, fans began filling the information gap themselves. What emerged was an unusually organized effort to document every disputed technical foul in real time. Supporters refreshed live box scores, clipped video highlights, collected timestamps, and created side-by-side comparisons with similar incidents involving other players. Rather than simply venting online, many treated each new call like a case study, building a public record that continued to grow throughout the season. Every additional technical foul became another chapter in an expanding discussion about officiating consistency. The issue also carried financial consequences. Before the season, the WNBA revised its fine structure, increasing the penalty for technical fouls through $7,000 to $1,000 each. While the policy applied equally across the league, fans argued that its impact differed depending on which players accumulated technical fouls most frequently. For Clark, each additional technical not only brought her closer to an automatic suspension, but also increased the financial penalties. To many supporters, the larger concern wasn't the dollar amount itself, but the perception that the system punished players for reacting while leaving the underlying officiating concerns unresolved. Throughout the season, Clark consistently avoided framing the issue as a personal grievance. Instead of asking for special treatment or requesting individual calls be overturned, she repeatedly advocated for full-time officials rather than the league's existing part-time officiating model. Her argument was that improving officiating consistency would benefit every player, not just herself. That distinction shifted the conversation away from Clark's individual technical fouls and toward broader questions about league infrastructure and officiating standards. It also created a more difficult challenge for the league, because the discussion was no longer centered on one player disagreeing with a whistle, but on whether the overall officiating system could be improved. Meanwhile, one question continued to linger over the season. What would happen if Clark eventually reached her 8th technical foul and triggered an automatic suspension? Under WNBA rules, a player is automatically suspended for one game after receiving a 9th technical foul during the regular season. The penalty also includes a $1,500 fine, with no hearing or appeal that changes the suspension. For most players, missing a single game would be inconvenient. For the Indiana Fever, however, the consequences could be much greater. Sitting at 15 wins and 10 losses, Indiana is in the middle of a tightly contested playoff race. Clark averages nearly 21 points, almost 8 assists, and 4 rebounds per game, but her value extends well beyond the box score. She is the centerpiece of the Fever's offense, the player whose passing creates open shots, whose shooting range forces defenses to adjust, and whose presence shapes the team's entire offensive identity. Removing her from the lineup would require Indiana to overhaul its approach with almost no preparation during one of the most important stretches of the season. The impact would also extend beyond the Fever. Throughout the season, Clark has consistently drawn sellout crowds, strong television ratings, and national attention that has helped expand interest in the WNBA. Every game she plays has become a major attraction for fans and broadcasters alike. A suspension would therefore affect not only Indiana's chances in the standings, but also the league's biggest television draw during a period of growing popularity. As Clark moved closer to the suspension threshold, every interaction with officials began attracting intense attention. Fans tracked live box scores, monitored every technical foul, and analyzed each conversation between Clark and referees, knowing that one more whistle could move her closer to an automatic suspension. That constant scrutiny created an unusual level of pressure. Every emotional reaction carried added significance because the technical foul count remained in the background at all times. Few professional athletes are asked to compete while knowing that every disagreement with an official could bring them closer to missing an important game. Supporters have not argued that Clark should be exempt from legitimate technical fouls. Instead, the debate has centered on whether the margin for error has become unusually small for one of the league's most visible players. At the same time Clark has been playing some of the best basketball of her career, the stakes surrounding every whistle have continued to grow. Not only for her, but also for her teammates, coaches, broadcasters, and a league that has benefited from the attention she has generated. The situation becomes even more significant when viewed in the context of everything Clark has already dealt with this season. Early in the year, her coaching staff managed her workload with a minutes restriction because of injury concerns. Throughout her rookie campaign, there has also been constant discussion about the level of physical contact she faces and whether officials consistently enforce the rules when she is defended. Add to that an escalating fine structure, a suspension threshold that sits only 2 technical fouls away, and Clark's repeated public calls for full-time officials, requests the league has yet to address with a structural response, and the pressure becomes impossible to ignore. It is an extraordinary amount for any one player to carry, especially during what should be one of the most celebrated stretches of her career. A week that began with a remarkable 45-point, 10-assist performance quickly shifted into conversations about fines and a possible suspension. That contrast has become central to the broader discussion. Many Fever fans argue that a playoff contender should be focused entirely on basketball, not on monitoring a technical foul counter every game. Instead, every whistle now carries added weight because of concerns that have been building since June. The unresolved technical foul, Clark's repeated calls for full-time officials, the suspension mathematics, the detailed documentation created by fans, and Stephanie White's carefully worded public comments have all become part of the same conversation. At the center of it remains one question. Will the WNBA respond with a meaningful solution rather than continued silence? Supporters are no longer asking only for statements or changes buried in league memos. They want visible action that addresses Clark's repeated concerns about officiating consistency and demonstrates that the league recognizes the issue as structural rather than isolated. So far, many believe the response has consisted primarily of fines and silence. Meanwhile, attention has continued to grow. Fans have documented every disputed whistle. National media outlets have expanded the discussion beyond WNBA circles, and Clark has continued advocating for officiating improvements rather than personal exceptions. That leaves pressure coming from multiple directions at once: players, fans, and commentators, all while the league searches for an answer that does not create even more controversy. The countdown remains active. 2 more technical fouls would transform a hypothetical discussion into an automatic suspension. Every remaining Fever game carries playoff implications, and every possession matters. Clark remains the engine of Indiana's offense, making the possibility of a suspension more significant than a routine disciplinary action. Whether or not she reaches that threshold, the pressure already exists. The question now is whether a league that has publicly credited one player with helping transform its commercial growth is prepared for the consequences of sidelining that same player during a playoff race. Fans believe they have documented the issue. The media has amplified the conversation, and Clark has repeatedly explained her position. The remaining question is whether the WNBA will respond with meaningful action or continue relying on fines while hoping the debate fades away. If the conversation continues on its current path, many believe it won't disappear anytime soon.